Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the future of taxation may look. And we're not going very far into the future here. I think it'll be within the next few years, and we're already seeing early signs of it now. But there's a few things, as in pieces on a chessboard, if you like, that are moving together. The real amping up of white supremacists really have to be crushed. The hiring of hundreds of thousands of IRS, Internal Revenue Service taxation agents, the IRS buying vast numbers of weapons and ammunition, and the desire to disarm white people. They're not too concerned about, the criminal gangs running around with guns. Hey, who cares? People getting shot in downtown Chicago. That's life in a big city. But law-abiding white citizens owning guns somehow is terrible, even though they've committed no crime and maybe never used a gun. So looking at all these sort of things coming together, and I'll add a bit where the Western government's completely under the control of and the direction of the globalists and only representing globalist interests. If you look at every Western government, they are all pursuing policies that completely check the globalist World Economic Forum policy prescription. No Western government is pursuing policies that the people want, and that's as plain as day. But coming back to the taxation thing, Western governments are all broke, and they're borrowing madly to fund living standards that are impossible to underwrite with the actual strength of the economy. All Western economies are sending their manufacturing and a lot of their value-add industries offshore to China and India and so on, and they say they're replacing it with services which are much less productive, and unless you're in the financial industry and you've got an oligopoly or a cartel or something, services are much less profitable as well. So the intrinsic worth and value of Western economies is equally in decline, and it's being orchestrated the whole, it's being done that way on purpose. There's no accident about it. And all Western economies are pursuing more or less that same prescription, maybe from different starting points and timelines, but all the same nonetheless. So coming back to taxation, throughout history, taxation has been through monopolies, oligopolies, cartels. So effectively the government of the day sells a cartel pricing power or monopoly pricing power to a group, an organization, or a George Soros or someone like that, and says, okay, well, you give us lots of money. And the government says, okay, Mr. Monopoly, you give us shitloads of money, and we'll allow you to run this monopoly. And the extra price you have to pay for the essential services, because usually what monopolies are built around, because if it's a discretionary item, people would stop buying it. So monopolies tend to work best, particularly if you're going to screw the populace, if it's an essential, got to have, like housing, water, energy, or something like that. So the government sells a monopoly, and the owner of a monopoly, who gets very rich in the process, in turn screws the populace, but gives the government lots of money so they can hire the goons and the thugs to in turn oppress the population, or put down any dissent, and imprison anyone that asks questions or talks about it. And I think we're very close to that now all across the West. And look what they did to President Trump today. For goodness sakes, that's how far things have gone down the slippery slope. So that's one way of doing taxation, just monopolies. And going back in history, if you wanted to use a road, you had to pay a large sum of money, or if you wanted to use a certain mill to mill your grain, or you wanted salt, there was a salt tax, and so on. So there were various monopoly taxes or regional monopoly taxes that were granted, but you had to give the government a lot of money. The other way of doing it was to create a situation where the populace is effectively breaking the law every day, and then you fine them for that law breaking. Anyone who goes faster than 1 kilometre an hour on the road is speeding, and then you can collect fines from them. Those sorts of things. And I think what the new taxation of the future is going to be, well, you've contributed to slavery, or you're a racist, or you're a white supremacist, or something like that, and there'll be a tax that'll be levied, or there'll be things like you've contributed to greenhouse gas. You're white, you've got an above average income, your house is got more than the average amount of bedrooms or something, more than the average amount of rooms, so you're causing greenhouse gas, so we're going to fine you and retrospectively apply the fines. If you don't pay it or refuse to pay it, then we'll send a bunch of armed goons around your house, just take everything that's inside it. And I think that's where the armed IRS agents are coming in. They want their own goon squad to go around and directly intimidate people, like the communists did when they were trying to change all the farming systems in the 1920s and 1930s, in China a little bit later in the 1950s, but in the Soviet Union, where goon squads would go around and say, you got to do it this way, and they just steal all the grain, and they just arbitrarily accuse people of not handing over enough grain, or not paying their tax, or whatever, just accusing them, being an enemy of the people, not being a good communist, being a bourgeois, being a middle class satanic capitalist. So it didn't matter. They just made it up, and then the goon squads with their guns would come around and take whatever they wanted, and beat people up, or shoot them, as the case may be, arrest them. And it was all very arbitrary. It was, the rule of law completely broke down. So I think something like that's coming in the West. So I think it'll be arbitrary seizure of property, arbitrary seizure of a house. We're taking your house, and it'll be valued at X, and it'll be handed over to BlackRock at some knockdown price. And then it'll be, you won't be able to rent anywhere. So I think white people will be specifically targeted. Now, if you want to grab a lot of money quickly, the white people who own the houses, who have the property, who have the savings, who have the retirement savings, all that sort of stuff, the cars. So there's a whole lot of things that can be, if you want to target any section of the population, the white middle class is it. So there's barely trillions to be stolen from the white people, and they want to steal it, and they intend to steal it is my view, and they'll try and make up crimes that you've done, and somebody overheard you saying something, which means you're a white supremacist, and white supremacists have to be fined. We have to take your house, and in order to protect others. Now the sort of the architecture, if you like, of this sort of stuff was really set in motion with the divorce courts, where men had their property arbitrarily seized and handed over to someone else without their consent or without their prior agreement. They didn't enter and sign an agreement at the beginning of a relationship. So, well, I'll hand my house over. No, that never happened. The government stepped in and said, okay, you're culpable. You're a victim. We're taking what you have and giving it to so and so. So they took that, and then. But the outrage of it, the arbitrariness of it, just arbitrary seizure of property and assets for someone who's committed no crime, and I think that's the formula that they'll use in approximation. So they justify it by saying, well, we're only trying to protect children, little children. We're only trying to protect children. You do want to protect children, don't you? You damn fascist Nazi. Are you Hitler? You don't want to protect those children? Is that what you're saying, Hitler? So that was their justification. We're only trying to protect the vulnerable. We're only trying to protect women and children. So that was how they went, and that's how they justified it. And they actually got away with a lot of people. Oh well, I suppose children do need to be looked after, don't they? So therefore, just taking someone's legal rights away, stealing their property and stealing their money, and treating them like rubbish in a court, that's okay because it's protecting children, little children, crying babies. So that was how they went about it, and they got away with it. But that architecture of arbitrary seizure in the name of protecting, some alleged vulnerable group, is really that's the architecture they'll use going forward. Now there'll be a lot of propaganda about it, and the media will be on side. White supremacists did this, and there'll be all these false flags. There'll be attempted, kidnappings of Gretchen Whitmer every day. Someone will be trying to kidnap, and there'll all be white supremacists, and the government's got no choice. When the public and democracy is threatened, when democracy, Gretchen Whitmer is democratic, when democracy is threatened, the government has to act. What can they do? They have to arrest all white people and confiscate their property. It's only just, because they're protecting and protecting the rest of us. Your strong, hairy-chested government is protecting, and they just have to crush these white supremacists and take their houses and take their property and take their money, to compensate the good Americans from those evil white supremacists. So there'll be a narrative that'll be concocted. It'll go like that. But I think that's where they're heading with this. And I don't think it's far away. They desperately need the money. It's not coming from somewhere else. Only white people have got it. It won't be the elite white people. They're fine. And they wouldn't need that many agents and that many guns to go after the wealthy. The wealthy are, there's only not even 1 in 100 that have decent wealth. So it's really the people in the sort of the top, say the top 25%, give or take, and they're nearly all, not all, but nearly all white people, and that's who they're going to go after. And they won't be fussy about the accusations they make and the charges they make. And given that, certainly with Merrick Garland there and those sort of people in the the deep state running all the organs of the so-called justice system, they can make up any crimes they want, accuse anybody they want at any time, drag them into a court, because you've got to make it kind of look good. Drag it in with an activist judge there, and like January 6th, people can be arbitrarily arrested without charge and left in prison for 12 months or more. When if they hadn't been charged, they can't be convicted in a court of law, so they're just sitting in. I think that'll be what'll happen. And again, just going back to the divorce courts, the tactics in divorce courts is to endlessly harass any man who won't sort of do what he's told. Be a good little boy and you sign over everything you've got to us. Okay, that's it. Good little boy, and they sort of take that attitude. And if you don't, for any man who doesn't go along with it, they'll say, right, we've got to do an exhaustive, psychiatric evaluation. It's going to cost $50,000, and you're going to pay for it. And then we'll have another one after that for another $50,000, and then another $50,000, and then another $50,000. So we'll destroy you. We'll financially crush you. You will not even have one penny in your back pocket when we finished. Or you can do what we tell you to do. So that's I'm paraphrasing, but that's the game they play. And this is the same game they'll play with white folks going forward. Cop the plea. So we'll ruin your life, but you won't be driven to utter despair on the street. We'll let you. We'll leave you a little something there. But that's what they're going to do. I'm almost convinced that's where things are heading, and that's why they want to take all the guns away, and why when 3 guys come in the front door with guns and body armor and all that sort of stuff, and demand you hand this over, and you ask to see a warrant, then maybe you'll get slapped around. Don't get smart with us, buddy. You do what you're told, or else. And I think that's definitely going to happen. And I think the basic standards of law, and not only the rule of law being applied equally, but the process of law, having a warrant signed by a judge and all these sorts of things, it's gradually all disappearing and melting away to the point where it's just arbitrary brute force. And the trouble with arbitrary brute force is if you go into someone's house and they've got a gun, then they can brute force you back. and they don't want that, and that's why they have to take the guns. The black people or the minorities, they'll leave them alone. They don't have enough that's worth taking. There might be an odd one or two, Thomas Silas, man, come and take his house, but for the rest of them, there's nothing there for them to take. A few basketball players and so on. And it's probably good public image management to let the rich basketball guys keep it, because then it sort of it suggests or implies they're being fair and reasonable and so on. They're only going after those white devils, and so they should, because they're all Hitler, and that's where things are going. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.